Ladies and gentlemen, when people suddenly start acting different around you, cold, distant, even bitter, it's not always about what you did wrong. Sometimes it's about what you did right. See, when you begin to grow, when you begin to change, when you begin to step out of the comfort zones that once held you captive, people notice. They may not say it, they may not admit it, but they feel it deep down in places they don't talk about. Your growth disturbs the atmosphere they've been used to. It confronts the parts of them that have stayed the same. There are people who liked you better when you were confused, broken, dependent, and unsure of yourself because it made them feel needed. It made them feel in control. But when God begins to wake you up, when He begins to pull the scales from your eyes, and you start walking in purpose, walking in clarity, walking in conviction, that's when the shift begins. That's when the ones who used to clap for you start sitting on their hands. That's when the ones who once celebrated you begin to compete with you. That's when the ones who once called you friends start speaking behind your back. It's not because you became a bad person. It's because you started becoming you, the real you. The healed you, the focused you, the version of yourself they never thought you'd reach. And that version doesn't play small anymore. That version doesn't settle. That version doesn't live to make everyone else comfortable. That version rises. And not everyone in your life is prepared to rise with you. Some people only loved you as long as you stayed in the box they built for you. The moment you outgrew the box, the moment your dreams got louder than their doubt, they felt threatened. Because when you elevate, it reveals their refusal to move. Your transformation exposes their stagnation. Your discipline shines a light on their distractions. And instead of being inspired, they get offended. That offense turns into distance. And distance left unchecked can turn into bitterness, jealousy, even hate. But don't take it personally. You are not responsible for the insecurities others carry. You are not required to shrink just so they feel tall. What's happening is spiritual. When God begins to increase His hand on your life, when He starts pushing you into rooms your past disqualified you from, some people can't handle the favor that follows you. They'll say you've changed, but what they mean is you're no longer bound. See, people will tolerate your pain, but they'll struggle with your progress. They'll be quick to pray with you in the valley, but go silent when God sets your feet on the mountain. Why? Because pain connects, but purpose convicts. And your purpose is beginning to speak louder than their excuses. You're not bragging. You're not better than anyone, but your light reminds them of what they've dimmed in themselves. And that's not your fault. There's a cost to growth. It's not always money or time. It's people. Relationships that once felt like home now feel heavy. Conversations that once gave you life now drain you. People who once walked beside you now walk away from you. It hurts, I know. But don't resist the separation. They'll mourn the pruning. God is not subtracting to punish you. He's subtracting to protect you. Everyone who starts with you is not assigned to finish with you. You have to learn to bless those who leave. Pray for those who suddenly turn. Love them, but don't chase them. Their hate doesn't mean you failed. It means you've moved forward. It means you've stepped into a place they're not willing to go. And the truth is, some people can't handle the version of you that healing created. Some people fell in love with your brokenness because it made them feel whole, but you're not broken anymore. You're not confused anymore. You're not living to please the crowd. You're walking to please the King. So the next time you feel the sting of someone's silent hatred, ask yourself, what did I grow out of that they refuse to grow into? What old version of me are they grieving that I've already buried? And most of all, what is God trying to make room for in my life by removing what no longer serves my future. There's something powerful about silence, something that many people misinterpret. When you stop talking, when you stop explaining, defending, or justifying yourself, some folks will start creating stories in the empty spaces you leave behind. And not just stories, accusations, assumptions, suspicions, but the truth is, your silence isn't a weapon. It's a witness. It testifies that you no longer owe anyone a performance. That's when the resentment starts to rise, not because you've wronged them, but because you've outgrown the need to prove yourself to them. When you begin to mature, when you find peace in your soul and rest in God's approval, you become quiet in a world that loves noise. And that quietness, that confidence, it confuses people who were only ever comfortable when you were uncertain, when you were anxious, when you needed their validation to breathe. But the moment you realize you don't have to respond to every opinion, every criticism, or every whisper, they feel it. They feel the shift, and some won't like it. People get uncomfortable when you stop giving them access to your emotions. They don't know what to do when you no longer rise to their bait or answer their questions with trembling hands. You see, some individuals thrive off your chaos. They love when you overshare, when you beg to be understood, when you go out of your way to explain your heart to those already committed to misunderstanding it. But when you choose peace, when you choose stillness, when you stop arguing and start living, that's when the tension rises. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've stepped into a kind of power they can't control. Your silence exposes their insecurity. It's not loud. It doesn't have to be. But it reveals everything. It makes people confront what's been buried in their hearts for a long time. That jealousy they never admitted. That comparison they never spoke out loud. That bitterness they smiled over. When you stop speaking, it forces them to hear themselves. And often what they hear isn't pretty. So they blame you, they point fingers, they say you've changed. They say you're cold, they say you're distant, but really they're just uncomfortable because they don't know how to function without your need for them. Let me tell you something. There comes a time when silence becomes necessary for survival. Not to ignore, not to hurt, but to protect your mind, your spirit, your destiny. There are seasons where God will call you to say less because your next move isn't meant to be announced, it's meant to be anointed. And some people can't handle that kind of shift. They don't know what to do when you stop broadcasting your pain. They're used to seeing you cry, seeing you worry, seeing you chase. But when you stop running and start resting in God, they'll say you're arrogant. They'll say you've got a new attitude. And maybe you do. Maybe you've learned that silence is strength, that peace is power, and that not every battle is worth fighting out loud. There are people who will turn against you the moment they realize they can no longer read you like a book. When your eyes stop pleading and your mouth stops defending, they panic because they built their confidence on your chaos. They felt strong when you were lost. They felt wise when you were confused. But now that you've found your footing, now that you've drawn boundaries and closed doors, they feel powerless. And sometimes instead of dealing with that truth, they turn it into hate. But let them talk. Let them assume. Let them twist the silence into anything they need to justify their own unrest. You don't have to explain the peace God gave you. You don't have to answer to the crowd when heaven has already cleared your name. The same people who now question your quiet were the ones who never truly listened when you spoke. They weren't invested in your healing, just your vulnerability. And now that you're not bleeding in front of them anymore, they call it betrayal. But it's not. It's healing. it's maturity, it's growth. You don't owe explanations to those who only show up to dissect your story, not understand it. You don't owe conversation to people who've already made up their minds. You don't have to keep speaking into ears that have already closed. Sometimes silence is your salvation. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to keep walking while others keep talking. And yes, some will hate you for it. They'll hate that they no longer have access to your thoughts. They'll hate that they don't know where you're headed next. But that's okay, because your silence is not rejection. It's redirection. It's God saying, let Maine speak for you now. It's God saying this next battle will not be won by argument, but by alignment. Let them wonder, let them wrestle, let them try to fill in the blanks. And you found your peace. And peace doesn't need to be loud. You just keep walking. Sometimes the people who suddenly start hating you are the very ones who once cheered you on. At least it looked like cheering. But deep down, they weren't celebrating you. They were celebrating the version of you that made them feel secure. As long as you stayed behind them, as long as your dreams didn't rise higher than theirs, as long as your light didn't shine too brightly, they could be happy for you. But the moment your steps began to stretch, the moment your gifts started opening, the moment favor began following you, envy crept in. Wearing the mask of hate, envy is a quiet poison. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It hides behind compliments. It lingers in the silence when you share good news. It's present in the eyes that avoid yours when you talk about what God is doing in your life. It's not always loud, but it's always there. And often that hate you suddenly feel isn't really about you. It's about what you represent. You're not hated because of your flaws. You're hated because of your growth, your favor, your resilience, because you dared to believe that there was more to your life than what others settled for. You've got to understand, when someone is full of disappointment and they see you walking in purpose, it stirs something in them. They start to compare their lack of movement to your momentum. And instead of asking God to search their own heart, instead of taking it as a moment to reflect, they project. They lash out. They turn cold. They twist your joy into pride, your passion into arrogance, your discipline into showmanship. Not because it's true, but because it helps them feel better about not trying. Some people don't hate you. They hate the reflection of what they gave up on. You're getting back up after a fall, when they see you staying faithful through pain, when they watch you pour everything into your calling, it confronts the parts of them they bury. It brings up the dreams they walked away from, the promises they stopped believing for, the courage they no longer chase. And instead of letting that confrontation lead them to repentance, it leads them to resentment. This world teaches us to compete, to measure, to compare. But the truth is, your purpose isn't in competition with anyone. You're not trying to outshine them. You're just finally letting your light shine the way God intended. But when people live in shadows, light feels like an attack. Your obedience to God becomes offensive to those who obey fear. Your consistency looks threatening to those who obey fear. Your consistency looks threatening to those who gave up after the first storm. Your joy feels fake to those who've forgotten how to feel. But don't let that discourage you. The hatred that's aimed at you is often misplaced pain. It's their own frustration with their choices, their own grief over what they've lost, their own anger over where they thought they'd be by now. And you just happen to be the one standing in front of them when the flood breaks loose. But don't take it personal. It's not your fault they buried their gifts. It's not your fault they ignored the calling. And it's not your burden to carry their bitterness. You keep walking in grace. You keep doing what God called you to do, because the very thing they hate in you is the very thing He's using to bless others. When you start succeeding, especially after they counted you out, It shakes the foundation of what they believed about you and about themselves. They remember when you were struggling, when you were silent, when you were stuck, and they never expected you to rise. But here you are, still here, still going, still praising, still trusting, and that confuses the enemy because you weren't supposed to survive. You weren't supposed to bounce back, but God had a plan. And no amount of envy can stop what he set in motion. Now understand this, the people who envy you today might have been the ones you once encouraged, the ones you once helped, the ones you once believed in. That's why it hurts, not because they changed, but because you finally saw what was hiding behind the applause. But let that be a lesson. Not everyone who claps is cheering. Not everyone who listens is learning, and not everyone who stays is standing with you. You've got to get to a place where your identity isn't tied to people's approval, and your purpose isn't shaken by people's opinions. God didn't call you to be liked. He called you to be faithful. He didn't raise you to fit in. He raised you to stand out. And yes, sometimes standing out means being misunderstood. Sometimes it means being hated by the very ones you tried to bring along. But even if they envy, even if they walk away, even if their love turns to hate, God still honors obedience. He still rewards faith. He still lifts the humble. And in the end, it won't be their opinion that decides your future. It'll be His promise. There are moments in life when your growth becomes the reason someone turns against you. Not because you've hurt them, not because you've wronged them, but because your transformation confronts their stagnation. When you begin to change, when you start healing, maturing, rising, they see it. And what they see reminds them of everything in themselves they've neglected, avoided, or refused to face. That's why people sometimes start hating you for simply doing better. It's not about arrogance, it's not about pride, it's about the mirror you unknowingly hold up just by walking in your purpose. You see, growth is a revealer. It doesn't just reveal what's new in you, it exposes what's lacking in others. When you start to say no where you used to say yes, when you set boundaries instead of bending over backwards, when you protect your peace instead of pleasing people, they notice. And for some, that shift is uncomfortable because they were more at ease when you were smaller, weaker, dependent. As long as you stayed where they first met you, in that broken place, in that confused state, they felt secure. But when you started stretching, when you started healing, when you began to move forward without their permission, it disrupted the dynamic they relied on. And this is where many people struggle. You weren't supposed to grow past their expectation of you. You weren't supposed to rise from what they saw you fall into. You weren't supposed to become strong in the very area they knew you were weak. That's when the attitude shifts. That's when the silence comes. That's when the support turns to sarcasm. And the love starts to feel like distance because some people were not committed to you. They were committed to a version of you that made them feel better about themselves. There are people who will celebrate you as long as your growth benefits them. But the moment your growth begins to convict them, it becomes a problem. The moment your discipline starts highlighting their excuses, your healing starts highlighting their wounds, your courage starts shining a light on their fears, that's when the resistance begins. It's not always loud, sometimes it's subtle, a colder tone, a backhanded compliment, a sudden absence when you need them the most. But don't let that shake you. Your journey is not meant to make everyone comfortable. It's meant to make you faithful. Faithful to who God is shaping you to be. And part of that journey will involve leaving behind certain attitudes, certain habits, and yes, certain people. Not out of bitterness, but out of obedience. Because God can't take you into your next if you're still trying to drag along what only belonged to your past. People will say you've changed, and they'll be right. But what they won't say out loud is they missed the version of you they could control. The version who didn't know their worth. The version who over-explained, who second-guessed, who lived to be liked. But the moment you stopped asking for permission to grow, you became a threat to their comfort zone. And when people are forced to confront their own growth, or lack thereof, they often choose criticism over reflection. It's easier to label you as the problem than to admit they haven't moved in years. But listen closely. Don't dim your light just to keep others comfortable in their shadow. You were not created to shrink. You were not called to remain in cycles just to keep familiar company. Your growth is evidence that God is at work in your life. And anyone who truly loves you, anyone who truly values your soul, will not be intimidated by your growth. They'll be inspired by it. They may be challenged, yes. But growth in those who care about you should stir growth in them too. That's how God moves in community. He uses one person's transformation as a seat for many. Yet, not everyone will choose to be inspired. Some will walk away. Some will distance themselves. Some will criticize from a distance because they can't handle watching you walk where they never had the courage to go. And that's okay. Growth requires room. And sometimes the price of peace is letting go of what once felt like home. But know this, God never removes without restoring. He never calls you out without preparing something better ahead. The people who walk away during your transformation were never assigned to the version of you God is building. So bless them, forgive them, release them, and keep walking. There's something painful that happens when people start hating you for reasons they don't even understand themselves. You begin to notice a coldness in their tone, a change in how they look at you, a silence where there was once, but when you ask them what's wrong, they say nothing. And deep down, you know, something shifted. You can feel it, but they can't admit it because even they can't put it into words. Why? Because sometimes the hate that people direct toward you isn't coming from their mind. It's coming from something deeper in their spirit. What's happening around you isn't always about what you've done. Sometimes it's about what they're wrestling with internally. They don't even realize that what they feel toward you is rooted in spiritual unrest. Your presence unsettles something in them. Not because you're doing wrong, but because you're walking in truth. When someone is not at peace with themselves, when they're hiding wounds, burying guilt, running from conviction, they can't be comfortable around someone who walks in the light. And so instead of facing their darkness, they turn against your light. There's a battle going on in the unseen realm, and it often plays out through human emotions. That's why the Word tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not about personalities. It's not about petty arguments. It's not even about you as a person. It's about what you carry. It's about the Spirit within you, the favor on you, the grace you operate in. Because when you start walking in the Spirit, those who are walking in the flesh will begin to react, not because you're attacking them, but because your presence exposes what's been sitting dormant for too long. Sometimes people hate you because you're peace convicts. They're chaos. You walk in calm, and they built their life around conflict. You speak gently, and they survive on sarcasm. You forgive quickly, and they cling to grudges. And when your life begins to reflect what they wish they had, instead of being drawn to learn, they push away to protect. That's the truth. Some people would rather label you fake than admit they've been living without peace for years. It's easier to call your joy an act than to confront their bitterness. But that's where we must be careful not to internalize what's really spiritual. Don't take it personal when the enemy uses people to try to plant doubt in your spirit. Don't let their coldness make you question your warmth. Don't let their withdrawal make you question your worth. What you're experiencing is deeper than emotion. It's warfare. And when you're under spiritual attack, your greatest weapon is not explanation, it's prayer. You don't have to defend your name in every room. You don't have to prove your heart to every person. What you do in the Spirit will do more than what you say in the flesh. And if we're being honest, sometimes the hate you feel from others is rooted in their jealousy of your resilience. They've watched you go through storm after storm, yet you still show up, still serve, still believe, still love. And they wonder, how does she still have joy? How does he still trust God? Because they expected your pain to paralyze you. They expected your past to break you. But instead, God used it to build you, and that confuses them. That unsettles them. That frustrates the darkness still clinging to their soul. Let's not forget, even Jesus was hated without cause, not because he did wrong, but because he did right. Not because he condemned, but because his righteousness made others confront their sin. His very presence stirred resistance, not because he spoke harshly, but because he carried truth. And the same Spirit that was in him is working in you. So don't be surprised when people react to your growth with suspicion, when they question your motives, when they pull away without explanation, when they mock what they don't understand. But here's what I want you to hear today. Their rejection is not your responsibility. Their misunderstanding is not your mission to fix. Your call is to love them anyway. Pray for them anyway. Forgive them anyway. Because this fight is not between you and them. It's between light and darkness. And light doesn't argue with darkness, it just shines. It keeps shining. It refuses to be dimmed. So when people start hating you for no clear reason, when their behavior shifts without warning, step back and pray. Ask God for discernment. Ask him to guard your heart. Ask him to help you respond in the Spirit, not in the flesh. Because what's happening in the unseen is more important than what you see with your eyes. This is not the time to get petty. It's the time to get prayerful, the time to get anchored, the time to press deeper into the one who knows your heart and fights your battles. There will come a time in your life when the very people you loved, the ones you prayed for, supported, stood by, and believed in, will begin to withdraw. They may not say it outright, but they begin to distance themselves quietly, almost subtly. It starts with shorter conversations, fewer messages, and eventually silence. And you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? Why does it feel like they're suddenly against me? But the truth is, not everyone is meant to walk with you into every season of your life. And the silence you hear from them now might just be God's protection, not rejection. Sometimes people start to hate you because they were never assigned to the healed version of you. They were attached to your brokenness, your insecurity, your doubt. They were comfortable with who you used to be, not who you're becoming. And now that you're walking in truth, in purpose, in strength, it makes them uncomfortable. Not because you've done something to them, but because your progress highlights their lack of it. And rather than confront their own stagnation, they choose the easier path. Distance, detachment, even disdain. But here's something deeper we must grasp. When God starts to elevate you, he will allow separation. And that separation doesn't always come in the form of a loud betrayal. Many times it's a slow fade, a drifting, and it's confusing because you thought those people were with you. You thought they were for you, but God saw what you didn't. He heard the conversations behind closed doors. He saw the hearts that were only closed when you were down, but secretly resisted your rise. And in his mercy, he removed them not to punish you, but to protect you. You see, not everyone can handle your calling. Not everyone is equipped to walk beside someone who's serious about God. Some people liked you better when you were compromising, when you were lost, when you were unsure. But now that you're seeking wisdom, now that you're living with conviction, now that you found peace in the presence of God, they can't relate to you anymore. And instead of rising with you, they'd rather label you, dismiss you, or even speak against you. Well, let me remind you, this is not the time to chase people. Don't beg them to understand your journey. Don't plead for their support. When God starts shifting your surroundings, it's because He's shifting your assignment. And some voices can't go with you where He's taking you. Not because they're bad people, but because they no longer align with your purpose. And when purpose changes, relationships will too. That's part of growth. That's part of maturity. That's part of being led by the Spirit and not by your emotions. And yes, it hurts. It hurts when people you love pull away. It hurts when you give them your heart and they return silence. It hurts when they misunderstand your transformation and call it pride, when they mistake your boundaries for arrogance, but you must let them go with grace. Bless them. Release them. Because clinging to what God is removing can delay what He's trying to build in you. God is calling you to higher ground, and not everyone has the strength to climb with you. That's not your fault. That's not your burden. You don't have to carry the weight of their opinions or their absence. Your assignment is not tied to who walks with you. It's tied to who sent you. And when God sends you, He will sustain you with or without the people you thought you needed. And sometimes the very people who walk away will later come to see what God was doing in your life all along. But that's not your job to worry about. Your job is to remain faithful, to keep walking, to keep growing, to keep loving. Don't harden your heart. Don't let the silence of others drown out the voice of God. He's still speaking. He's still guiding. He's still leading you through every valley and into every victory. There's a peace that comes when you stop fighting to be understood and start trusting that God understands you fully. And when you live from that place, when you stop chasing people and start chasing purpose, you'll find that the room may grow smaller, but your spirit grows stronger. The circle may tighten, but your vision sharpens. And the loss of people will no longer feel like rejection. It will feel like preparation. So if they walk away, let them. If they stop calling, release them. If they can't handle your healing, love them from a distance, because what God is doing in your life is bigger than their opinion, deeper than their misunderstanding, and more powerful than their silence. Keep your eyes on the one who called you. Keep your heart soft, and let your steps be ordered by the one who never leaves, never forsakes, and always finishes what He starts.